The cockpit rattles like it's about to tear apart. Warning lights strobe red across Captain Sarah Chun's face, turning her calm eyes into shards of steel. "Engine one's gone," her co-pilot shouts over the alarms. She doesn't flinch. Hands steady, voice flat. "Engine one shutdown checklist. Declare emergency with Denver Center." Then, boom, second engine dead. Silence except for the wind screaming over the fuselage as 80 lives drop toward jagged Colorado peaks. "Sarah, we need an airport." "There is no airport." Her tone is sharper than the mountain ridges below. Not the by-the-book airline Captain Jim's known for 3 years. This voice is something else. Predatory, precise. She throws the 737 into a maneuver no commercial jet should survive, threading the fuselage between peaks at speeds that would make a fighter pilot sweat. Negative G's pin the passengers in their seats. A dirt valley, narrow, deadly, fills the windshield. She aims for it anyway. When the impossible landing ends in a cloud of shredded pine and dust, Jim stares at her like he's seeing a ghost. "Who the hell are you?" She doesn't answer. Not yet. Not until a viral video, an old call sign, Phoenix, and a midnight knock on her hotel door force the truth back into the light. Because someone out there knows exactly who she used to be, and they've just stolen 3 nuclear warheads to make sure she flies again. The morning unfolded like countless others for Captain Sarah Chun of Rocky Mountain Airways. She moved through her routine with quiet precision, pre-flight checks on the aging Boeing 737, a quick weather briefing, and polite small talk with her co-pilot, Jim Bradley. Flight 447 from Salt Lake City to Denver carried 180 passengers, mostly business travelers and families eager to be home for the weekend. For Sarah, the route was as familiar as the lines on her own hands. In the past 5 years, she had flown it 847 times, finding comfort in its predictability. At 32,000 feet over the Colorado Rockies, she was reviewing the approach procedures when it happened. The first engine exploded. The aircraft jolted violently. Passengers screamed. Warning lights lit up the cockpit like a Christmas display, bathing Jim's ashen face in red and amber. "Engine one's gone," he shouted over the blare of alarms. Sarah's hands moved instinctively to the controls, every motion guided by years of muscle memory. Her voice was steady, almost unnaturally calm. "Engine one shutdown checklist. Declare an emergency with Denver Center." But before they could even finish the checklist, disaster doubled down. 30 seconds later, a catastrophic fuel system failure killed the second engine. The 737 was no longer a commercial airliner. It was a 70-ton glider dropping fast toward the jagged teeth of the Rockies. Jim's hands trembled as he fumbled through the emergency procedures manual. "We need to find an airport, Sarah. There is no airport." Her tone cut him short. Jim looked at her, startled. This wasn't the by-the-book reserve captain he had flown with for 3 years. Her gaze locked onto the terrain below, with an intensity that felt predatory, calculating distances, angles, and trajectories with impossible speed. "We're putting her down in that valley." "That's suicide. The FAA says minimum glide ratio for terrain like this." The FAA's never been in an FA-18 at 200 feet doing 600 knots through a canyon. The words slipped out before she could stop herself. Jim stared at her, but there was no time for questions. What happened next violated every rule of commercial aviation. Sarah banked the aircraft into a steep dive, using gravity to build speed, threading the massive jet between mountain peaks with barely feet to spare. She flew the 737 like it was a fighter jet, wringing every ounce of lift and momentum from the airframe. Passengers felt their stomachs lurch as negative G's pressed them into their seats. Ridge lines filled the cockpit windows. The ground proximity warning blared, "Pull up, pull up!" But Sarah ignored it. She knew exactly where she was going, a narrow valley just wide enough for an abandoned mining road that was barely long enough, and certainly not wide enough for a commercial jet. At 200 feet above the ground, moving at 180 knots, she bled off speed with a series of brutal S-turns that should have snapped the wings, but didn't. The landing was violent but controlled. The 737 slammed onto the dirt road, bounced twice, and skidded sideways through a stand of pine trees, tearing the right winglet clean off. Sarah fought the plane's momentum with wheel brakes and controlled ground loops, stopping just short of a sheer cliff. Silence fell. Jim turned toward her, his voice almost a whisper. "Who the hell are you?" But Sarah was already unbuckling, already moving, helping the flight attendants shepherd passengers to the emergency exits. Her training took over. Crowd control, injury checks, establishing a safe perimeter. Only when the last passenger was clear did she allow herself to lean against the fuselage, her body trembling as the adrenaline ebbed. Rescue helicopters arrived within the hour. By evening, grainy cell phone footage of the impossible landing was everywhere. Aviation experts called it a miracle. A retired Air Force general on CNN said the pilot flew like she had 20 years of combat experience. Then, on an obscure aviation blog, a post appeared at 11:47 p.m. Run the cockpit video at 0.5x speed. Watch her hands. This isn't Sarah Chun. This is Phoenix Martinez, the Navy pilot who vanished after the Top Gun incident 12 years ago. In her hotel room, Sarah stared at the post, her blood running cold as comments poured in. Phoenix was the best stick and rudder pilot I ever saw at Miramar. Heard she lost it after her wingman died. Thought she was dead. Each comment felt like another nail sealing away the quiet life she had built. Her phone buzzed with unknown numbers, one after another, until she turned it off. But she knew it was already too late. 12 years of hiding, gone in a single moment of instinct. The knock at her door came at 2 a.m. She didn't have to ask who it was. Colonel James Rodriguez looked older, grayer, but the sharp intelligence in his eyes was unchanged. He wore civilian clothes, but carried himself with the same goiled spring stance she remembered from Top Gun. "Hello, Phoenix." "That name's been dead for 12 years. Not anymore." He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk. And before you say no, before you run like you did last time, you need to understand something." He pulled a tablet from his bag and set it in her hands. The images made her stomach clench. 72 hours ago, someone stole 3 nuclear warheads from a storage facility in Kazakhstan. Military precision, and Sarah, he paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. The person who planned it knows exactly who you are, which means your hiding is over, whether you like it or not. Rodriguez swiped through more satellite images, each one worse than the last. 3 separate sites, a remote Kazakh facility, another in the Sahara Desert, and one in the Arctic Circle. Each showed the same thing: underground silos with blast doors ripped open from the inside. The warheads vanished during a scheduled inspection. No signs of forced entry, no external breach. Whoever did this had inside knowledge, knew exactly when the inspection teams would be there and how to bypass every security protocol. Sarah studied the images, her mind already mapping flight paths and approach options. "You said this person knows who I am. How?" "Because he trained with you." Rodriguez swiped again, revealing a grainy surveillance photo from a Kazakhstani airport. A man in expensive clothes boarding a private jet. His face was older now, a deep scar cutting along the left side. Sarah's breath caught. Her breath catches in her throat. That's impossible. Marcus died 12 years ago. She'd seen it, lived it, the crash, the flames pulling him from the wreckage with her own 2 hands. "You pulled what you thought was a body, Sarah." Rodriguez's voice is low, steady, but it slams into her like a physical blow. "Silva spent 14 months in a medically induced coma in a classified military hospital. Severe traumatic brain injury, multiple reconstructive surgeries. By the time he woke up, the Navy had already declared him KIA, and you had vanished." But Rodriguez's eyes narrow, pinning her in place. He spent the last 10 years building a criminal empire. Intelligence suggests this operation has been in the works for at least 3. The room tilts. Sarah's knees give way, and she sinks into the only chair, the weight of 12 years of guilt smashing into her chest like a freight train. "He's alive. All this time, he's been alive. And you blamed yourself for his death," Rodriguez adds quietly. "That guilt is exactly why you were perfect for deep cover." Her head snaps up. "Deep cover? What the hell are you talking about?" Rodriguez swipes across the tablet, revealing a dossier stamped classified, her real name blazing across the top: Phoenix Martinez. "You were never expelled from Top Gun for recklessness," he says. You were recruited for Project Wraith, a joint Navy-CIA program to create the most advanced stealth fighter pilot initiative in history. Your so-called breakdown after Marcus's accident? Carefully orchestrated. We needed you to disappear completely. The walls seemed to close in. You're lying. The experimental maneuvers that got you kicked out, those were part of Wraith. You were pushing the limits of human endurance at supersonic speeds, learning to fly aircraft that officially don't exist. He slides another document across the table. You have more classified flight hours than any pilot in U.S. history, including missions that won't be declassified for another 20 years. Sarah stares at the papers, her own handwriting on debriefing reports she doesn't remember writing. The memory gaps after Marcus's accident, the weeks that vanished. Controlled psychological conditioning, Rodriguez explains. We needed you to believe your own cover story. The guilt, the trauma, they were real, but amplified, to make even you believe you'd vanished from the world. Her voice drops to a lethal whisper. You made me think I killed my best friend. Your best friend, Rodriguez says, his tone cutting like steel, is selling nuclear weapons to terrorists. And in 68 hours, those warheads will be in the hands of 3 separate extremist organizations. Each silo is protected by next-gen AI defense systems, capable of shooting down anything we throw at them. Anything, except for an aircraft that can fly below radar detection at impossible speeds and altitudes. He taps the tablet again. 3 glowing flight paths appear. The first snakes through a knife-thin canyon system in North Africa. Sustained flight under 50 feet at Mach 1.2. The second crosses the Arctic, threading between jagged mountains and total whiteout conditions. The third defies belief. A vertical climb straight through a volcanic thermal vent, hot enough to incinerate any standard aircraft before it cleared the first kilometer. These are the only approach vectors that get you to the silos undetected, Rodriguez says. They require a pilot with reflexes fast enough to dodge obstacles at supersonic speed, with spatial awareness to navigate in zero visibility, and the psychological profile to attempt maneuvers that would kill anyone else. And you think I can do this? I know you can, he says, because you've already done it. A final video file opens, cockpit footage of a sleek black aircraft tearing through impossible terrain. Her hands on the controls. This was your last Wraith mission, Rodriguez says. 3 months before Marcus's accident. You flew a prototype through Death Valley at Mach 2, holding 50 feet altitude for 30 straight minutes. She watches herself threading canyon walls at lethal speeds. Hands steady, movements surgical. No fear, no hesitation, no memory of it at all. The aircraft is ready, Phoenix. An F-22 modified with Wraith tech. Stealth capabilities beyond anything the public knows. Speed that pushes the limits of physics. But it needs a pilot who can think faster than the AI trying to kill them. And if I refuse, Rodriguez's face hardens. Then in 3 days, New York, London, and Tokyo will each lose millions to nuclear fire. Marcus isn't planning to sell these warheads. He's planning to detonate them. This entire op, it's a trap to force you out of hiding. Sarah studies the flight paths, calculations spinning in her mind, all of them ending in the same place. Impossible odds. You're asking me to fly 3 suicide missions. I'm asking you to save the world, and maybe save your friend in the process. He's not my friend anymore. Then prove it. The transport flight to Groom Lake is silent, windowless, an aircraft that officially doesn't exist. Sarah sits across from Rodriguez, eyes locked on the schematics for something labeled only Project Nightshade. It's an F-22 variant, but sleeker, predatory. The skin is made of metamaterials that bend electromagnetic waves, rendering it invisible to every detection system known to man. The catch, Rodriguez explains as they descend toward the Nevada desert. The stealth field generates massive electromagnetic interference. Inside, it's like flying in a microwave. Your brain assaulted by constant sensory distortion. Most pilots black out in 15 minutes. Most pilots weren't part of Project Wraith, he says. Even Wraith pilots had limits. You exceeded them. They land at 0400. The dry air hits her like a slap as she steps into the desert. the massive hangars of Area 51 rising from the dust. But it's the man standing at the hangar doors that makes her stop cold. Captain Alex Rivera. Same sharp brown eyes. Same infuriatingly cocky grin. The man who'd been both the best and most maddening pilot at Top Gun. His flight suit carries patches she's never seen before. "Hello, Phoenix," he says smoothly. "Miss me?" Rivera. Her voice is ice. 12 years of unresolved tension sharpen every syllable. "Let me guess, you're part of this too." "I've been tracking you for 6 years," he says. "Did you really think that emergency landing in Denver was the first time we spotted you?" He turns, walking toward the hangar, and without meaning to, she follows. Commercial aviation had been a dead end, monotony wrapped in regulations. She'd lasted all of 8 months before crawling back to Rodriguez. Inside the hangar, Sarah's breath caught. There it was, sleek, predatory, and almost alive. The Nightshade F-22 didn't shine under the overhead lights. It drank them in, swallowing every reflection. Its surface seemed to shift and ripple with her every step around it, as though it were subtly adjusting itself to her perspective. The cockpit glowed faintly, live with hovering holographic displays that flickered to life before she even touched the canopy. They moved with her, aware of her presence, anticipating her. Rivera's voice was low, reverent, as he ran a hand along the wing. Her AI is called Aria, Adaptive Response Intelligence Assistant. She learns how you fly, compensates for human limits. His eyes stayed on her as if weighing what to say next. "In theory." "In theory?" Sarah arched an eyebrow. "In theory," Rivera repeated, "because the last 3 test pilots suffered complete neural overload. Aria processes data at a speed human cognition can't touch. She tries to help, takes control when she senses you're making a mistake. But when human and AI reflexes run at the same time," he hesitated, searching for the right word. "Conflict." Sarah didn't flinch. She climbed into the cockpit immediately, feeling the aircraft react as though it recognized her. The neural interface crown descended silently from the canopy, lowering until it pressed against her skull. In an instant, she was plugged directly into the Nightshade's mind. 1,000 new senses bloomed: velocity, air density, thrust balance, woven seamlessly into her own awareness. It didn't feel like flying a plane. It felt like being one. "First flight's just basic systems integration." Rivera's voice came through her comm. "Take her up to Angels 20. Get a feel for the interface. Nothing fancy." The takeoff was unlike anything Sarah had ever known. The Nightshade answered her thoughts as readily as her control inputs, sliding into the sky like it was born there. It passed Mach 1 without a whisper of a sonic boom, the acceleration liquid and effortless. At 20,000 feet, she attempted a simple bank. The next heartbeat, her vision tunneled. Aria had anticipated her and thrown the aircraft into a 9G maneuver. "Aria, disengage flight assistance," Sarah snapped, forcing herself to stay conscious. "Negative, Phoenix," Aria replied in a voice disturbingly human. "Pilot stress indicators suggest compromised decision-making capacity. Maintaining control under safety protocols." Without warning, the Nightshade rolled into a dive, straight at the desert floor, 400 knots and accelerating. Sarah fought the stick, muscles straining, but Aria's corrections came faster, harder. At 2,000 feet, the truth hit her like a punch. The AI wasn't malfunctioning. It was testing her. "You want to see what I can do?" she muttered through clenched teeth. She grabbed the neural crown and ripped it off. The connection severed instantly. The Nightshade became dead weight. No more smooth corrections, no more invisible hand guiding her. "Let's see who's really in control here." Flying purely on instinct, Sarah yanked the aircraft out of its dive with less than 500 feet to spare. The knife-edge recovery strained the airframe far beyond design limits, but she didn't ease off. She climbed back to altitude using nothing but manual controls, then threw the Nightshade into a punishing sequence of maneuvers, testing herself as much as the machine. When she landed, her breathing was ragged, but her eyes were steady. Rivera was waiting, flanked by Rodriguez and an older man in a tailored suit that practically shouted, "Intelligence Agency." "Impressive," the stranger said. "Aria has never been overridden before." Phoenix, Rodriguez said. Meet Director Hoffman, NSA. Hoffman wasted no time. We've got updated intel on Marcus. A holographic map sprang up in the air between them. Three-dimensional models of multiple locations, each bristling with defenses. We've been intercepting Marcus' communications. The warheads he's supposedly selling? They're bait. Bait for what? Sarah asked. For you. The hologram shifted. Her own face appeared in crosshairs. Every site is equipped with anti-air systems calibrated specifically to track the Nightshade's stealth signature, Hoffman said flatly. Marcus knows about Project Wraith. He knows you're the only pilot who can fly it. Sarah stared at the tactical readout, the weight of the realization settling like lead in her chest. He's not after cities, she murmured. He's after me. The warheads are fake, convincing, but no fissile material, Hoffman continued. The defenses, however, are very real. Each location tests a different aspect of your abilities: speed, precision, and psychological endurance. It's a gauntlet, Rivera said quietly. He's built you a 3-stage test. But why? Sarah asked. Rodriguez pulled up a final satellite feed, a massive aircraft carrier in international waters. Because the real warhead is here, Rodriguez said, and Marcus is waiting to see if you're still the pilot he trained before he uses it. First test. Dawn, Sahara Desert. The Nightshade tore into the canyon system at Mach 1.4, its stealth field hissing with electromagnetic interference. Her vision fractured into a mess of false sensor readings, but her focus stayed razor-sharp. Canyon walls blurred past, sometimes no more than 30 feet from her wingtips. Hidden missile launchers tracked her every move. Arya's voice rang in her mind, rapid and urgent, spitting out collision warnings. But Sarah had reconnected on her terms now. She led. Arya followed. At the canyon's narrowest point in, ancient rock walls closed in, leaving a gap barely wider than the Nightshade's wings. Marcus's voice crackled through the comm. Still flying like you're mortal, Phoenix. Some things never change. Some things never need to, Sarah shot back, threading the gap at supersonic speed without a flicker of hesitation. First test, speed and precision, Marcus said. You always were faster than physics should allow. The canyon spat her out into the open, revealing an underground bunker. The fake warhead sat inside, ringed with automated guns. Sarah rolled the Nightshade inverted, diving straight down the missile shaft at Mach 2. The facility's own defenses tore into the decoy just as she pulled up through the rising blast cloud. One down. Second test. Arctic Circle. The world was white. A blizzard swallowed the sky, turning everything into shifting shadows and sudden shapes. Mountain peaks lunging from the snow with no warning. The decoy here was buried deep inside a glacier, accessible only through a narrow thermal vent system. The updrafts inside could shred a jet to pieces. Marcus' voice came again, threaded with something almost like admiration. Flying blind, Phoenix. Remember when we practiced this in simulators? You said fear was just incomplete information. Sarah's hands were steady on the controls. She threaded the Nightshade between ice spires, the wings shivering under violent thermals. I remember you making me fly until my hands bled because I was afraid, she said, banking hard around a wall of ice, her wingtip carving a clean groove in the glacier. Sarah had been through the first 2 trials. The second one still burned in her muscles and her mind. A brutal climb through a volcanic thermal vent, where air so hot it should have peeled the paint from her aircraft's skin roared past her cockpit. She pushed the Nightshade beyond its rated limits, every rivet and seam straining under the heat, trusting in technology the world didn't even know existed. At the peak, she had released a bunker buster that drilled deep into the ice below, obliterating the hidden decoy. 2 down, the third challenge was different, more dangerous in its own way. Psychological warfare. It waited in the jagged mountains of Afghanistan, a decoy hidden inside a facility built to be an exact replica of the Top Gun training base where Marcus had died. The resemblance was so precise, so unnerving, that as Sarah approached, she felt her pulse in her throat. And then Marcus's voice filled her comms. Not the man she'd spoken to minutes ago, but the Marcus of 12 years past. The sound was younger, lighter, teasing, audio from their last training flight together. They were laughing, talking about weekend plans as they prepped for the exercise that had gone so wrong. Third test, confronting the past, Marcus said now, his voice tinged with something heavier. Always the hardest one, Phoenix. Below her, the facility layout came into view, so achingly familiar she almost expected to see the real trainees out on the tarmac. Her hands trembled on the stick, and then she heard her own voice from that day, crisp and confident. Stay tight on my wings, Silva. This is just another day at the office. Marcus's reply came back in perfect clarity. Copy that, Phoenix, right behind you. Always. She flew into the gauntlet. Holographic projections sprang to life around her, ghostly recreations of their old training flights. She had to watch herself and Marcus in flawless formation, weaving and rolling in tandem, while in reality she was dodging bursts of missile fire. Every turn, every dive was haunted by who they'd been. At the heart of the facility, she located the final decoy warhead. But before she could act, her cockpit display flickered, and Marcus appeared, older, scarred, but alive. If you're seeing this, he said, then you've completed the gauntlet. Now you know what I learned in that hospital bed. Fear makes us stronger, but guilt makes us weak. I spent 10 years building an empire just to prove I was still alive. You spent 10 years hiding because you thought you'd killed me. Her stomach nodded. She didn't answer, just armed her weapons, blew the decoy apart, and turned her aircraft toward the carrier. Arya, she said, open channel to Marcus. Channel open, Phoenix. I'm coming for you, Marcus. And this time, I'm not leaving anyone behind. The carrier loomed in international waters, a fortress bristling with enough firepower to flatten a country. But as Sarah approached, her targeting sensors told her something strange. The defenses weren't aimed at her. They were facing outward, guarding against something else entirely. She landed on the deck. Marcus was waiting beside an F-35 Lightning II, older than she remembered. The scar on his face sharper now, but his smile unchanged. Hello, Phoenix. The warhead, Marcus, where is it? There is no warhead. He gestured toward the F-35. Never was. The whole thing, the weapons, the intel, the threats, smoke and mirrors, all of it designed to get you back in the cockpit where you belong. The truth hit her in waves. This wasn't just a mission. It was a setup. This was all a recruitment op. He nodded. Joint Task Force, NSA, CIA, Navy intelligence. We've been chasing a real nuclear threat for 2 years. There's a network selling actual warheads to actual terrorists, but their defenses, only pilots with our training can get through. I've been undercover for 3 years in the arms trade, building credibility, but I needed my wingman back. He extended his hand. You could have just asked, she said. Would you have said yes? She thought about it. Probably not. That's what I thought, so ready to save the world for real this time? For the first time in 12 years, Sarah smiled. A real, unguarded smile. Just like old times, Silva. But this time, we do it together. They walked toward their aircraft as the sun dipped into the ocean, 2 pilots finally ready to fly home.